breaking news today. The nation's capital is in turmoil, with bold attacks just steps from the centers of power, repeat offenders quickly returning to the streets, and residents being urged to rely on selective statistics. Tonight, we discuss a stringent temporary federal intervention, setting clear boundaries, enforcing real consequences, and avoiding any mission creep.
Hello, and welcome to That News Show, where we discuss the latest facts, fakes, and hypocrisy as reported by the legacy media. Let's roll the tape.
Fox News reports that the Virginia Attorney General is sounding the alarm on crime in Washington, D.C., as President Trump considers federal intervention. The situation is critical. Our capital is plagued by ideologues who prioritize criminals over victims, treating the latter as mere inconveniences. In response, federal officer numbers have surged by approximately 450 due to the prevalence of repeat offenders and a disturbing trend of prosecutors downgrading gun crimes to misdemeanors. While some crime categories have shown a decrease, the reality on the streets near the Capitol tells a different story. The president possesses the necessary authority to temporarily restore order, potentially involving the National Guard, with a focus on maintaining civil liberties. The strategy is clear. Enforce the law, prosecute offenders fully, and transparently publish the results before withdrawing. Prepare yourselves.
He was given a cash bail on July 15th, 3 days later, which allowed him to just simply walk out of jail. And 3 days later, he's trying to abduct this child at a Fairfax mall. But the reality is, Steve Descano epitomizes so much of what we've seen on the left right now, which is a criminal first, victim last mindset.
This pattern is all too familiar. Lenient crime policies, cash bail that trivializes violent histories, and a courthouse culture that views repeat offenders as misunderstood rather than dangerous. When criminals are prioritized over victims, a family at a suburban mall becomes a test case, and a toddler a near tragedy. Public safety must be prioritized over ideology as demanded by communities. Here are the key issues. The suspect involved in the Fairfax Mall incident had over 30 prior cases, including violent charges, with some not prosecuted by the scrutinized local office. This is not a glitch. It's a deliberate system choice that invites disaster. Quote the release just days before the attempted abduction. The suspect exemplifies the revolving door associated with progressive prosecution in Northern Virginia. In response, state leadership is intervening. The governor has called for an investigation, and victims report feeling neglected by the prosecutor's office. A serious indictment of the current approach. Calls for accountability and even a recall are growing louder in Virginia, as these failures endanger the entire Commonwealth. The broader scenario mirrors what we see in the nation's capital. Residents face visible disorder, while political leaders use selective statistics to downplay the fear, repeat offenders, and high-profile violence. A statistic cannot shield a parent racing to prevent a child's abduction. When the majority of weapons and repeat offender cases are declined, dropped, or downgraded, it signals impunity, not deterrence. Effective course corrections respecting both liberty and the rule of law include prioritizing victims and consequences. This means pairing policing of prosecutors who will charge and seek meaningful sentences, particularly for repeat and violent offenders. The plea away pipelines for illegal guns and violent conduct must end, enhancing transparency and metrics. Charging decisions, declination rates, and sentencing outcomes should be published, allowing the public to evaluate prosecutorial effectiveness in providing targeted, time-limited federal support where local efforts falter. In the Capital Region, deploying federal resources to restore order is justified, but must have clear objectives, a defined timeline, and an exit strategy to avoid mission creep, establishing guardrails on government powers. We must crack down on crime without misusing federal tools against peaceful dissent. Security measures should not become a blank check for surveillance or politicized prosecution, ending the sanctuary for impunity mindset. When local offices ignore detainers or downplay violent histories, they attract further lawlessness that affects multiple jurisdictions. The current White House initiative for genuine accountability in the Capitol, robust federal prosecution of serious offenses, and rejection of superficial fixes is a step in the right direction. It reinforces deterrence without promoting permanent federal oversight or an expanding security state. This is the conservative balance, tough, targeted, and temporary when Washington, D.C. needs a reset, intensely local when counties like Fairfax need to overhaul a failing philosophy. Parents should never have to become emergency responders at a mall to protect their children. It's time to close the revolving door, end ideological experiments, and prioritize the rights of law-abiding citizens over excuses for the lawless.
So our job is to, seek the law and report the truth without fear. And as I've asked our investigators, you're to be fearless, you're to be deliberate, but you're going to seek the truth. And what we've seen is systematic failures in Fairfax year after year of cases that have been mishandled, incompetence, but also dropped. I've heard from so many victims since this was announced that have reached out to our office, the Attorney General's office, that have simply shared stories of horror, of rape victims, those that have been the victims of horrible abuse, showing up in court, finding out with no notifications from Toscano's office that their case has been pled, cases where they've simply failed to properly file the evidence needed for trial, that have had cases dismissed. Over and over again, they've decided to side with felons instead of victims. And so I've always said, as Attorney General in Virginia, I'm going to be a voice for the victims. And we're doing that again with our investigation of Toscano's office.
We're nearly out of time, but should Steve Toscano resign?
Yes. He has completely abrogated and failed his oath, which is to be a protector of the citizens of Fairfax. I like to say, as Attorney General, I view myself as the people's protector. He has failed his job as protecting Virginians.
Virginians face a stark choice: continue to support a courthouse culture that overlooks repeat offenders, or revamp a justice system that prioritizes victims. The reality is clear and troubling. In a Fairfax mall, a toddler was nearly abducted by a suspect with over 30 prior cases, who was free until parents intervened, not the prosecutors. This is not justice. It's a sign of institutional complacency that endangers ordinary families. Immediate policy changes are necessary to end lenient prosecutorial practices. When violent histories and weapons cases are dismissed or reduced, deterrence is lost. In D.C., only about 1 in 5 adults arrested with illegal guns receives a felony conviction, with many cases being declined or dropped. This leniency serves as a warning, not a model, at the line policing with prosecution efforts. The federal surge in the Capitol led to numerous arrests and gun seizures. These tactical gains are pointless unless prosecutors enforce significant sentences, particularly for repeat offenders of gun and carjacking crimes. Victims are often blindsided by plea deals and case dismissals, including mismanaged sexual assault cases. The systemic failure demands investigation and accountability from the local offices responsible. This issue extends beyond a single headline. The lenient policies emanating from the Capitol are eroding trust throughout Northern Virginia. The suspect in the Fairfax Mall incident, with a history of violent charges that were previously ignored by local prosecutors, represents the dangerous revolving door that alarms parents and emboldens criminals. So the community's calls for resignation and recall are not mere theatrics. They are necessary actions when the system fails to protect them. On the federal level, the strategy should be clear, and employ lawful emergency tools in D.C. when local efforts falter. The Home Rule framework permits temporary presidential oversight of the Metropolitan Police and the activation of the D.C. National Guard under special emergency conditions. These measures should be temporary, aimed at restoring order, not permanently federalizing local policing. Define clear metrics and an exit strategy for federal interventions. Set specific targets, track arrest to conviction rates, and ensure these measures are temporary, aiming for stability and accountability. Ensure that while crime is addressed, peaceful dissent is protected. Federal powers should not be used to surveil political opponents or suppress legitimate protests. Safeguards are essential to preserve freedom while enhancing security. Personnel changes are also critical. The new U.S. Attorney in the Capitol is moving from a policy of indulgence to one of accountability, advocating for stricter laws for offenders under 25 and treating youth-related armed robberies and gun offenses with the seriousness they deserve. This shift is crucial in a region experiencing a surge in carjackings and illegal gun possession. These developments are likely to influence Virginia politics significantly. The Attorney General's investigation into Fairfax's prosecutor and the governor's criticism of local release practices are putting pressure on Democrats, particularly those who have supported progressive prosecution policies. Voters are influenced by the direct impact on their safety and the effectiveness of the justice system in dealing with repeat offenders. The stark contrast between effective federal operations and the often inadequate local prosecutorial decisions could have significant political repercussions. Nationally, after years of prioritizing theoretical reforms over practical accountability, there's a shift back to a practical constitutional conservatism. Enforce the law, protect victims, apply federal authority judiciously, and then retract. This approach balances crime deterrence without creating an overbearing security state.
And the D.C. Superior Court judges give 1% of people who are carrying a pistol without a license prison sentence, and only 14% of felons in possession with a handgun a prison sentence. So D.C. Superior Court's a joke.
The record is indefensible, and it's precisely why Washington's courts have lost credibility with the people they are meant to protect. When carrying a pistol without a license results in minimal incarceration and felon in possession cases rarely lead to substantial prison time, it doesn't act as a deterrent. It essentially grants permission. Here's what the facts expose. The district's sentencing framework is voluntary, allowing judges significant discretion to issue short and long split sentences, often converting what should be prison time into probation with minimal confinement. Appellate precedent confirms that these guidelines create no enforceable rights, enabling trial judges to disregard them as long as the sentences don't exceed statutory maximums. Consequently, in recent years, only about 1 in 5 adults arrested with illegal guns in Washington ended up with a felony conviction, following a series of declinations and dismissals at the prosecution stage. From 2018 to 2022, police made over 5,500 arrests for carrying a pistol without a license, yet fewer than 2% resulted in a prison sentence, a stark contrast to federal firearms prosecutions, where nearly all convicted defendants receive significant prison time. This discrepancy indicates systemic leniency, not equal justice. The first priority should be implementing consequences that are effective and lasting. Although statutes mandate incarceration for certain gun crimes, daily practices in superior court often lead to suspended sentences and probation, undermining the law's intent. The recent deployment of approximately 450 federal officers across various agencies aimed at seizing guns and drugs and addressing armed robberies and narcotics reflects a shift towards visible enforcement. The administration is also considering activating the district's National Guard under presidential authority as a temporary support measure if emergency conditions justify it. This legal framework should include clear timelines, specific arrest-to-conviction goals, and a well-defined exit strategy. Accountability must extend to charging decisions as well. Data shows a high percentage of illegal gun arrests never lead to felony convictions, with many cases being declined at intake or dismissed later. The new United States Attorney is addressing this by prioritizing gun cases, focusing on youth violence, and urging the council to repeal sentence reduction exceptions for offenders under 25, which currently weaken deterrence. Weekly case updates and adherence to federal directives on immigration status aim to enhance transparency and restore appropriate consequences for serious crimes. Media coverage, particularly by Fox News, has underscored the issue of prosecutorial failures and repeat offenders, advocating for a federal intervention. While their reporting highlights the need for such measures by featuring voices like Virginia's Attorney General and illustrating the impact on victims, it could improve by offering a more balanced view. Acknowledging the district's reported decline in violent crime while still addressing the need for intervention due to weak prosecution efforts and chronic recidivism would provide a fuller picture. Including precise prosecution and sentencing data on gun cases would help viewers understand the scale of the issue. Furthermore, incorporating independent legal experts and civil liberties advocates would clarify the scope of presidential powers and ensure that any National Guard involvement is appropriately limited. Veiled representations of the judicial process from arrest to sentencing could illustrate where the system fails, contrasting it with federal outcomes to highlight the need for stronger deterrence. Ultimately, a conservative constitutional approach is required. Surge federal resources temporarily, set clear targets and timelines, ensure prosecutors charge and pursue meaningful sentences, and withdraw once order is restored. Washington's residents, commuters, and small businesses deserve a justice system where illegal gun possession and felon firearm possession lead to significant certain penalties, not just paperwork and probation.
You can either treat criminals like criminals and hold them accountable and give them long periods of time in prison, or you can take the diaper approach and act like these are babies. And by the way, the D.C. City Council is so out to lunch, they passed a law, the D.C. Juvenile Rehabilitation Law, that treats 25-year-olds and under as essentially juveniles, and they get some sentence reduction.
When you treat young adults aged 17 to 24 like toddlers, you end up with toddler-level accountability. The Youth Rehabilitation Framework in the district allows judges to reduce sentences below mandatory minimums for offenders under 25 and even set aside convictions excluding only the most severe crimes. This policy has been expanded over the years to include emerging adults up to 24. New requirements also emphasize individualized plans and quicker reentry pathways in youth facilities, with auditors focusing more on process than outcomes. Reformers have acknowledged that the emphasis on rehabilitation often falls short in practice, highlighting the misaligned incentives. The consequences of weakened deterrence for armed teens and young adults extend across the community. Our retailers face higher insurance premiums, leading to increased shelf prices and smaller stores. Households encounter a hidden tax through costlier groceries and additional delivery surcharges in high-risk areas. Employers are compelled to invest in private security and reduce hiring, while tourism shifts towards shorter visits, impacting hotel and restaurant revenues. In the public sector, leniency today leads to increased future costs due to repeat offenses, which escalate police overtime, court backlogs, and medical expenses. This disparity is significant. Recent data shows that only a small percentage of adults arrested with illegal firearms receive felony convictions, as the Youth Act allows many to avoid mandatory minimums and even seal their records, undermining both deterrence and background checks for employment. Consider your family budget as a monthly pie. A lenient sentencing regime takes a larger slice for security and loss, leaving less for savings, mortgages, or tuition. For a mid-sized retailer, think of shrinkage and security costs as a variable interest rate that climbs with each lenient plea deal, resulting in fewer entry-level jobs and reduced operating hours. For city finances, the lack of deterrence accumulates like compounding debt, increasing costs over time. A targeted federal surge focused on firearms, carjacking crews, and drug corridors could be the right solution, provided it is limited and measurable. The legal framework allows for temporary augmentation or control of local policing in emergencies, and the National Guard can be activated in the district without state-level barriers. This authority should be used with clear objectives and timelines, converting arrests to charges, charges to convictions, cooling violent hotspots, and ensuring a planned reduction to prevent mission creep. The prosecution strategy should prioritize serious offenses involving guns and youth, eliminate sentence reductions for those under 25, and stop the practice of setting aside repeat offenses as if they never occurred. The regional impact is also significant. When Washington softens penalties, neighboring areas like Northern Virginia and Maryland bear the spillover costs. Local law enforcement leaders have noted that this leniency makes commuters and tourist targets, reflecting systemic failures rather than mere bad luck. They advocate for a brief, intense federal intervention to stabilize the situation and a close watch on local prosecutors who failed to pursue serious cases. To homeowners facing higher insurance premiums, this issue is tangible. Reduced deterrence means higher costs. For young workers, it translates into fewer work hours as stores close early. Small business owners must choose between expanding or investing in security measures. For parents, it raises serious concerns about safety during simple activities like walking from a parking garage. The solution involves tightening the Youth Act to prevent undermining mandatory minimums for violent and gun-related crimes and ending automatic set-asides that obscure repeat offenders from employers and courts. Oversight mandates for youth facilities should focus on whether recidivism and victimization are decreasing. Public metrics should include arrest to charge and charge to conviction rates and the time to incapacitate repeat violent offenders. The federal surge should strictly target violent crime and drug trafficking with clear goals and a defined endpoint. It is crucial that federal power never be used to suppress peaceful dissent or free speech. Maintaining a clear boundary between maintaining order and overreaching is essential. Support for a tougher stance is overdue. As long as young offenders believe the system will bend to avoid custodial sentences, illegal firearms and bold robberies will persist. While claking, policing, prosecution, and sentencing to ensure the consequences of violent crime are felt by the perpetrators, not by single mothers in Anacostia or small business owners on H Street, is critical. Well, there you have it. The pattern is clear. The Capitol has become a test case for what happens when slogans replace standards. Order is a choice, as is drift. The White House possesses lawful tools to provide federal assistance for a short, defined period. Use them, evaluate their effectiveness, and then withdraw. We must hold local leaders accountable, ensure arrests lead to real prosecutions, and uphold civil liberties as non-negotiable. We cannot allow selective data to distort the reality visible on our streets. It's crucial to secure the Capitol, steer clear of endless missions abroad, and halt the expansion of the security state. When rules are clear and enforced, chaos dissipates. If not, it proliferates. Be sure to comment below. Give a like and subscribe. This is just the beginning. Stay tuned for the next one.